Morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to our visitors this morning. We're glad you're here and invite you to stop by the welcome table after the service in Robinson Lounge, which is just outside the back door there, so that we can answer your questions and get to know you a little bit better. Again, welcome to our congregation. We're very happy that you've joined us. We have one announcement, a very long announcement, as you might imagine, with Spring Sale this week. Okay. Setup for the 2026 Spring Sale starts today after the service. If you can stick around and lend a hand setting up the tables, we would be very grateful. See the website for information about donating. That's the UUCP website, right? Yeah, see the church website for information about donating, volunteering for, and shopping the sale. Donations are accepted this week during specific drop-off hours that are posted on the website and on the bulletin board. You can also still get your Spring Sale raffle tickets today after the service. Proceeds benefit our congregation. And we invite you to view the new gallery that features some of this year's nonprofit organizations the proceeds from this year's sale will support. Find it outside near the name tag rack. I think that's a wonderful idea that we can see all of the organizations that the funds will go to. We expect that this year's sale will be another great success with your help. Okay, and now our chalice lighting. A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. Martin Luther King Jr., letter from a Birmingham jail.
Please join us in our unison affirmation printed in your order of service. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life. Spirit of community, in which we share and find strength and common purpose. We turn our minds and hearts toward one another, seeking to bring into our circle of concern all who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those who are in pain, either in body or in spirit. Those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. We are part of a web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all in the universe. We are grateful for the miracle of consciousness that we share, the consciousness that gives us the power to remember, to love, to care. Amen.
In place of a reflection today, we have a reading from the book Love at the Center, Unitarian Universalist Theologies, and the editor is Sophia Betancourt, who is also the president of the UUA. This is from the chapter When Love is Criminalized by Reverend Elizabeth Eng. As I write this in December of 2023, Texas has just enacted SB 4, enabling any law enforcement to arrest anyone suspected of migrating without authorization. Brittany Watts has been charged with a felony for having a miscarriage in Ohio. I am visiting my in-laws in Florida, where being transgender, undocumented, and teaching the truth are all being criminalized. Laws have always and continue to criminalize love. The love that is caring for our health in body and mind, the love that is migration, the love that is teaching and learning and stewarding history, the love that is feeding the hungry, the love that is making a home outside when you have none, the love that is bailing someone out of jail, the love that is protest, the love that is self-determination. The list could go on and on. Our allegiance cannot be to laws, but instead must be to love.
My sophomore year in college, I was really confused about selecting a major. I remember standing in the quad at Emory and looking over at the beautiful window of the Pitts Theology Library, and I thought, you should major in theology. Then something said to me, no, you can't do that. That's too impractical. So I decided to major in English, get certified to teach, and become a high school English teacher, just like my mother. In my senior year, in the midst of following through with that plan, a college friend said to me, you should go to law school. We talked about what lawyers do, our love of writing, and ended that conversation with her going to Duke for law school and me putting the idea of law school in my back pocket. We graduated from college, and late into the fall, I got a teaching job at a high school. I enjoyed teaching, although I struggled with classroom management. Then one day, when I was grading papers, a compare and contrast composition to be exact, I realized I really missed writing. It was at that moment that I decided it was time to go to law school. I had a rough start in law school, but eventually I caught on. After working as a judicial clerk for 3 years, I started my career as a practicing attorney representing the state of Georgia in state and federal habeas cases and murder appeals. When I was tired of traveling all over the state for court appearances, I transferred to a division where I represented professional licensing authorities. When I applied for the position that involved prosecuting disciplinary cases, my supervisor said that with my criminal law background, she thought I would fit right in. I think my talk for today, The Law of Love, may have started back in 2017. In 2017, I noticed I had an increased desire for learning, a desire to be a student again. It was just this spark. As time moved on, the spark turned into a flame. The flame was a desire to be a student of theology. While practicing law during this time, I began to come in contact with lawyers who had degrees in theology, or should I say theologians who had law degrees. Some might think one discipline is a negative reflection on the other, but I believe there was some connection between the two. Around this time, I discovered Pauli Murray, a non-binary black civil rights lawyer and Episcopal priest. After learning about her life story and work, and by the time the pandemic had come around, I started exploring divinity schools. That's the short version of how I got here being talking out loud about the law of love. What do you think about when you hear the law of love? Some may think it is a contradiction of terms, that there is a really good joke that's gonna follow. Some may think it is the name of a bad new TV show that's a mixture of a legal drama and a reality romance. The law of love has become a thing for me, something like a quest. It might be a part of what we UUs describe as the free and responsible search for truth and meaning that we mentioned in our unison affirmation. The law and our legal systems permeate our lives. There are ordinances, rules, regulations, and statutes affecting practically every area of our lives from birth to death and everything in between. When we hear the word law, we generally think of statutes, bills that are passed by the legislative bodies and approved by a person in the executive position. Most of us are likely to describe a law as some fixed prohibition or some affirmative duty to do this or that. However, from a legal perspective, a law such as our Constitution of the United States of America is not as fixed as we might think. The law changes. Yes, the words of the Constitution haven't changed, but there were some subsequent amendments that had the effect of changing the Constitution. And over the years, our Constitution, ratified in 1788, and its subsequent amendments have been defined, shaped, and molded. Our Constitution has been molded by lower court decisions from cases that have gone unchallenged and from decisions in cases that have been heard by the highest court of our land, the United States Supreme Court, and the cases that that court declined to hear. So in many cases, the law adapts. Only recently have I thought about the word law in a different context or from a different perspective. For example, if your background is in science, you might likely think of the term law in connection with some scientific principle, such as the law of gravity, the law of inertia. Similarly, with economics, one might think of the law of supply and demand. I can't tell you anything about the laws of mathematics because although I enjoyed Algebra 2, when it came to calculus, I had to bow out. From a legal perspective, our laws are a public announcement, an announcement giving authority or permission, or sometimes requiring action by everyone who falls within a certain jurisdiction. That's a technical lawyer description. Practically, we all know that laws give and take away rights. The law is indeed subject to misuse and abuse. On my journey of discovering the law of love, I would come to learn of a number of members of the clergy who had first considered a career in the legal profession. Clergy such as MLK and Prathia Hall. Similarly, in all of my time studying theology, I have had several classmates who are lawyers. Perhaps these people, including myself, have been attracted to the potential of the law to do good. Perhaps the law is, or can be, the language of some forms of justice. In my last year of law school, I was involved in the senior banquet sponsored by the Black Law Students Association, where the speaker was Robert Benham, the then current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Georgia and the second Black graduate of the University of Georgia's Law School. One thing Justice Benham said has remained in my memory. He said, "We often see statutes, rules, and regulations as setting a standard for what's right or wrong in human conduct and interactions. However, our laws, particularly with respect to criminal laws, are not a standard." He stated instead, the law is the absolute floor. The law is the floor of decency between one person and another. Both criminal and civil law say nothing about what we should aim for in our interactions with other human beings or other living things. So when we describe ourselves as law-abiding, are we really saying much? This is not to say that laws are inherently bad, and certainly they are not inherently good either. William R. Murray, a UU minister and former president of Meadville Lombard Theological School, along with Kendall L.R. Gibbons, a past president of the UU Ministers Association, edited and published a book entitled Humanist Voices in Unitarian Universalism. In this book, they noted that Richard Rorty, a philosopher and well-known atheist, when asked to define the word holy, remarked that it is the hope that someday my remote descendants will live in a global civilization in which love is pretty much the only law. When I read this statement, I thought it does exist. This exclamation reminded me of the M&M's Christmas commercial, where the M&Ms walk in on Santa putting presents under the Christmas tree, and they surprise each other saying, "They do exist," and they faint simultaneously in shock. Now, of course, I didn't faint, but I had an immense sense of affirmation. If we open our eyes, we may find that the law of love is all around us. As a UU congregation, we have a covenant, and a covenant is a law of sorts between private individuals or groups of individuals. It is an agreement or promise that we hold sacred in our hearts and minds. It acknowledges the use of our agency. It's voluntarily entered upon the free will of the individual. It is entered and sustained without force or duress or undue influence or even possible punishment. The covenant of UUCP is relational, and its preamble states, "Our covenant affirms a commitment to building loving, healthy, and trusting relationships within our congregation. We make these promises in order to love better, relate more compassionately, and feel the power of our human connections." But what is this thing called love? There are several hit songs with this question in them, so love certainly has a bit of mystery to it. In looking for a definition of love, I was most intrigued by that of an Irish philosopher named Iris Murdoch. Although it is not quite a definition, but is more of a description, it still seems to encapsulate the concept very neatly. Iris Murdoch stated, "Love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real." One might wonder whether Iris Murdoch was exaggerating in his use of the words extremely difficult, but Murdoch's use of the words could have been a way of suggesting that it takes experience, it takes time, and likely some maturity to come to that realization. Biologist Umberto Maturano said, "To live in love is to accept the other and the conditions of their existence as a source of richness, not as opposition or restriction or limitation." The Reverend Elizabeth Wynn, who you heard from earlier in Patricia's reading, is a UU community minister and justice organizer. She defines love as the principled position that all beings deserve thriving, well-being, and respect. In the book How to Love, Thich Nhat Hanh states, "True love is made of 4 elements: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity." And love has another name. That other name is understanding. Before wrapping up this venture, I decided to look at one more source for love. In Love at the Center, Unitarian Universalist Theologies, Reverend A.P. Jananmanchi, a Hindu UU of Indian descent, notes that in his cultural and spiritual heritage, there is the Tamil phrase Anbe Sivam, which translates into love is God. That phrase was something I could wrap my head around. That phrase tapped into my affinity for music, too. It called to mind a contemporary gospel song by Canton Jones. The song is called Love Song. Although some might say the lyrics oversimplify complex theological ideas, the song has a calypso feel, and if you listen to it without any distractions, you'll imagine yourself in a very, very peaceful place. What's special about the song is its refrain, which has God asking rhetorically, how are you going to sing about love without singing about me? So my quest to discover and learn and understand the law of love continues. I've come to the conclusion that when we look deeper at the law, we can see that the law has characteristics that enable us to recognize or identify love. The law tethers, ties, and binds. The law is ubiquitous yet invisible. The law is relentless and persistent. Reverend Wynn's words, read by Patricia, assert that the law has in many instances criminalized love, but within the law is the possibility of reversals, of turnarounds, of 180-degree reorientations and transformations, and jubilee-like cancellations. The law is unerasable, yet ever-changing. Ultimately, we strive to live the law of love. The law of love can make more loving laws. The law of love can make laws more loving. The law of love can make itself over and over again. During my pursuit, I was reminded of one of my grandparents. I had older parents, and my father's parents had died before I was born. My mother's parents had separated when she was very young, and her father died, and her mother subsequently remarried. My mother would brag to us about how her second father had taken care of their family. His name was Emmett Faison, and my older sister called him Impo, so everyone else called him Impo. I remember my mother saying that Impo's mother did not want him to marry that woman who had 2 children. But he married that woman, my grandmother, anyway. My grandmother became his wife, and Impo became the father of those 2 children, one of them being my mother. Impo, a black man, worked in the steel mills for 45 years. He started in 1926 and often trained his newest white supervisor. Impo never missed a day of work, and he would always get up early in the morning before the rest of the family had awakened. And during winter months, Impo would light whatever heating apparatus was available to make sure the rest of the family woke up to a warm house. During the latter part of their lives, my grandmother had a series of strokes that had left her bedridden, and there were issues and a lot of hurt feelings about her care until her death. I had some sense of this, so I was very quiet around Impo. To be honest, I did not talk to him. I didn't ignore him, but I didn't initiate any conversations either. One day, Impo told my mother that I wasn't talking to him, and my mother asked me why, and I was silent. I had no explanation. What could I say? I couldn't say, you're angry with him, so I thought that meant I shouldn't talk to him. At that point, my mother instructed me to talk to Impo, and I was relieved, and so I did. After I started talking more to Impo, I recognized all the things my grandfather had done for me and the rest of our family. He had regularly picked up me and my brother from Catholic school on his side of town. When we would arrive at his house after school, he always had something for us to eat. I remember walking in the house and smelling the aroma of baked sweet potatoes, my favorite. One time I said to Impo with surprise, "You cook baked sweet potatoes?" And he responded, "I cooked them for you." I remember being very embarrassed and thanking him genuinely. As before, I always thought everything was for him, and he just shared a little with us. Well, Impo had a dog, a mutt he was given from a neighbor's pet litter. Initially, I was afraid of dogs, but Impo taught me how to be friendly. Impo had named the dog Rudy, and I felt like Rudy was our dog. When we would sit on the front porch swing, Rudy would lay down in front of us on his back, paws up, so we could rub his belly. I had seen Impo rub his belly before, so I knew what to do. Eventually, Impo became very ill, and after a brief period, he passed away. Impo's death was a huge loss to our family. The question came up of what should we do with Rudy? After Impo had died, his neighbors reached out to us, letting us know that they could hear Rudy howling from Impo's backyard for extended periods of time. I begged and begged my father to let us take Rudy to our home, and eventually my father agreed. We had a nice-sized backyard and 2 willing caregivers, me and my brother. After a week or so of Rudy being at our house, one day I went in the backyard and Rudy was gone. A couple of days later, we got a call from one of Impo's neighbors saying Rudy was back at Impo's house. Rudy was back at home, the place where he was born and had lived and had grown and shared his life with Impo. So perhaps the law of love in its fullness is unknowable, but I know it contains that something in Rudy that led him and guided him the 5 or so miles of multi-lane streets and roads from our house back to Impo's house. It was something in Impo that caused him to care for and show affection and kindness to my grandmother and her 2 children, and their children too, such that they became a family. It is something that crosses differences and divisions. It is that something that holds us together. It is the only law that lives. It is the only law made of light. May it be so, Ashe and amen. And at the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light carries us until we gather again. Go forth, grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of greater love, beauty, and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held, always, and always with neighbor and stranger, by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.